And to my son Tyler, who made all our sacrifices worth it. My father's voice boomed across the crowded restaurant. Glasses clinked. Applause followed. I forced a smile, even as my chest tightened. Then he added, laughing proudly, "Even making your sister drop out was worth it. Look how far he's gone." The laughter hit harder than the words. I stared at my family, my fork frozen midair, my throat burning. My mother smiled like she hadn't just heard him admit I was the family's collateral damage. Tyler smirked, basking in their approval. The celebration continued around me like I wasn't there. Cousins patted Tyler's back. Aunts praised my parents for their smart choices. Uncle Frank raised his glass again, toasting the family genius. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked how I felt about being the sacrifice that made this moment possible. I was invisible, just like I had been for the past 5 years. I lifted my glass, steady, calm. "You're right, Dad," I said softly. "It was worth it." They didn't realize that was a promise. They thought I was agreeing with them. They had no idea I was declaring war. My name is Rebecca Cole, and that night was the moment I stopped being their backup plan. The toast echoed in my mind for weeks. Every word felt like a dagger, twisting deeper each time I replayed it. My parents had celebrated my sacrifice like it was a victory. Tyler had accepted it like his birthright. But something shifted in me that evening. The quiet girl who had always nodded and smiled was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that family loyalty was supposed to flow both ways. They thought they had buried my dreams. They had no idea they had planted seeds of determination instead. I started making lists that night. Goals, plans, timelines. I mapped out everything I wanted to build, everything I wanted to become. The life they said I didn't deserve became my blueprint for revenge. I wouldn't just survive their betrayal. I would thrive beyond their wildest imagination. I would become so successful that their rejection would look like the biggest mistake they ever made. I would build an empire from the ashes of their favoritism. And someday, when they needed me most, they would finally understand what they had thrown away. Years earlier, I was a business major at Harbor University, months from graduation. Top of my class, interning at a consulting firm that had already hinted at a job offer. Then came the family meeting. My father's tone was practical, my mother's voice tearful. "Your brother's tuition went up. We can't afford both," she said. "Dad's solution? You're smart, Becca. You'll land on your feet later. Right now, Tyler needs the degree." The words hit me like a physical blow. I was 3 months from graduation. 3 months from everything I had worked for. I had spent 4 years maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I tutored other students to pay for my books. I worked weekends at the campus bookstore. My professors knew my name, respected my work, recommended me for honors programs. None of it mattered. Tyler's grades were mediocre, but he was the son, the heir, the one worth investing in. I sat there listening to them explain why my dreams were expendable, why my future could wait, why Tyler's degree was more important than mine. I nodded, pretending to understand, while my dreams quietly folded in on themselves. But deep down, anger was already taking root. I packed my dorm room in silence. My roommate cried harder than I did. My friends didn't understand why I was leaving. Neither did my professors. "This doesn't make sense," Dr. Peterson said. "You're my best student." I couldn't explain that being the best wasn't enough when you weren't the favorite. Tyler texted me once. "Thanks, sis. I'll make it up to you someday." He never did. I drove away from campus with everything I owned in my car, watching my future disappear in the rearview mirror. The girl who had believed in fairness died that day. My textbooks filled the back seat. For years of notes, projects, dreams, all packed into boxes like they didn't matter. I had spent months preparing for senior presentations, job interviews, graduation. Now I was driving toward nothing. The worst part wasn't leaving school. It was knowing my family saw this as logical, necessary, the right choice. They celebrated Tyler's continued education that night. I heard them through my bedroom wall, planning his graduation party, discussing his bright future. Nobody mentioned my sacrifice again. I fell asleep making a promise to myself. I would never be anyone's second choice again. I worked days at Murphy's Diner and nights doing bookkeeping for small businesses. I was 22 and exhausted, but I refused to drown. I kept my old textbooks, studied between shifts, and started managing budgets for clients who couldn't afford real firms. The work was simple at first, balancing books, organizing receipts, helping small shop owners understand their cash flow. But I was good at it. Really good. Between coffee refills and late-night number crunching, something was growing. Not just a side business, but a vision. I could see patterns others missed, solutions others overlooked. The diner customers knew me as the quiet girl who never forgot their orders. They didn't know I was revolutionizing small business finances in my spare time. Mrs. Garcia's bakery doubled its profits after I reorganized her suppliers. Tom's auto shop avoided bankruptcy because I caught his accounting errors. Word spread quietly through the business community. The young woman who worked miracles with numbers, who cared more about results than recognition. That's how my company began, in the back booth of a diner, between exhaustion and determination. While my family celebrated Tyler's internships, I was building something real. My parents never called to ask how I was doing. They only called when they needed something. A loan payment, a bill covered, groceries for mom. Tyler graduated with honors. They threw him a party I wasn't invited to. I saw the photos on Facebook. My mother's caption read, "Our pride and joy." The comments were worse. Family friends congratulating them on raising such a successful son. No mention of the daughter who had paid for it. I stared at those photos for hours, memorizing every detail. The way they looked at Tyler. The way they had never looked at me. Tyler's graduation cake had 3 layers. His cap and gown were perfectly pressed. Grandparents flew in from 3 states. The backyard was decorated with balloons and banners. I remembered my high school graduation. Store-bought cake, no decorations, my parents checking their phones during the ceremony. They had saved their enthusiasm for the son who mattered. Something cold and hard settled in my chest that day. I screenshot every photo, saved every comment. Evidence of their priorities. Proof of their choices. They would remember this moment differently when they needed me. They would wish they had invited the daughter they forgot existed. A regular client, Mr. Henderson, owned 3 struggling local stores. His books were a disaster. Inventory was chaos. He was weeks from bankruptcy. I spent 2 months rebuilding everything. Fixed his cash flow, reorganized his supply chain, negotiated better terms with suppliers. When the numbers finally turned green, he stared at me like I had performed magic. "You've got a mind for business, kid," he said. "Stop surviving, start building." Those words became my blueprint. I realized I wasn't just good with numbers. I was good with business. All of it. Strategy, operations, growth. I could see the big picture that others missed. Henderson's stores became my first real success story. Within 6 months, he went from near bankruptcy to opening a 4th location. He told everyone about the young consultant who saved his business. Referrals started coming in. Other struggling businesses, bigger problems, more complex solutions. I was working 18-hour days, but I loved every minute. Each success proved what my family had refused to see. I wasn't just smart, I was exceptional. I could build companies, save careers, change lives. All the potential they had dismissed was finally finding its voice. Mr. Henderson's faith became my foundation. Someone finally believed in me. I registered my company under a name my family wouldn't recognize, Cole Strategic Solutions. I rented a 1-room office above a laundromat and hired my first assistant, a single mother named Amy. We worked 12-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and pure determination. Word spread quickly in the business community. The young woman who could save failing companies, who could turn losses into profits, who worked miracles with spreadsheets and strategies. For the first time since leaving college, I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming something powerful. The scared girl who had packed her dorm room was gone. In her place stood a woman who built empires. Amy and I created systems that bigger firms envied. We streamlined processes, eliminated waste, maximized efficiency. Our clients didn't just recover, they thrived. The laundromat owner became our first office landlord, then our first success story. I restructured his entire operation, added delivery services, negotiated commercial contracts. His revenue tripled. People started calling me the turnaround specialist. Companies that had given up hope suddenly had waiting lists to work with me. I was 24 years old and already changing how businesses operated. My family still thought I served coffee for a living. They had no idea their discarded daughter was becoming a legend. 3 years later, I was consulting for mid-size companies, rewriting their financial strategies, and saving businesses bigger than the one my father had once worked for. Cole Strategic Solutions had 12 employees and offices in 2 cities. We specialized in corporate turnarounds, and our success rate was legendary. Tyler? He jumped from job to job, burning bridges everywhere he went. His degree hadn't taught him work ethic or humility. My parents kept calling him the successful one in their Christmas cards. I didn't correct them. I was too busy building something they couldn't even imagine. Our client list read like a business directory of success stories. Manufacturing companies, tech startups, retail chains. We saved them all. My team was recruited from top MBA programs, but they all said they learned more in 6 months with me than 4 years in school. Tyler had been fired from 3 jobs by then. Cultural fit issues, the HR department said politely. I knew the truth. He expected success without effort, respect without earning it. My parents made excuses for his failures while ignoring my victories. It didn't matter anymore. I was building something that would speak for itself. Success was becoming my favorite form of revenge. When Cole Strategic Solutions hit its first million in revenue, I sent my parents flowers. No note, no explanation. Just expensive roses delivered to their door. Mom texted, "Did you get promoted at the diner?" I smiled. Something like that. They had no idea their discarded daughter was building an empire. They still saw me as the girl who served coffee and counted pennies. The irony was delicious. While they bragged about Tyler's mediocre marketing job, I was revolutionizing how businesses operated. But I wasn't ready for the reveal yet. I was still building, still growing, still preparing for the moment when everything would become clear. The $1 million milestone was just the beginning. I had plans for 10 million, then 50, then 100. I would build something so massive that their early rejection would become legendary family folklore. I kept a photo on my desk from Tyler's graduation party. The image of their happiness at my expense fueled every late night, every difficult decision, every moment I wanted to quit. They had taught me that family sacrifices for success. I was just applying their lesson on a scale they never imagined. Every dollar earned was proof of their mistake. Someday they would understand the true cost of their favoritism. It started with a headline in the business section. Hartwell Industries files for Chapter 11. My father's company. The place where he'd worked for 23 years, climbing from floor supervisor to middle management. Weeks later, I learned Tyler had been fired from his marketing job for inappropriate conduct with company resources. The golden boy had finally tarnished. Dad's severance package was smaller than expected. Mom's part-time retail job barely covered groceries. For the first time in years, the family that had sacrificed my future was facing consequences for their choices. I watched from a distance, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but wasn't sympathy either. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad had always lectured about making smart choices and thinking long-term. Now his company was bankrupt and his favorite child was unemployable. Tyler's firing made local business news. Marketing manager terminated for ethics violations. I read the article 3 times, memorizing every detail. The golden boy's fall from grace was finally public. Mom called that week, voice shaking. "Have you heard from your brother? He's not returning our calls." I hadn't heard from Tyler in 2 years. Neither had most of his former friends. Success without character eventually exposes itself. Their perfect family was crumbling. Mine was just... One rainy evening, a knock echoed through my office. I was working late, reviewing contracts for our newest client. It was my mother, eyes red, umbrella dripping, looking smaller than I remembered. "Becca, we didn't know where else to go. They'd lost the house, the savings, everything. Dad's new job paid half his old salary. Tyler couldn't find work anywhere. We just need a little help," she whispered. I invited her in, made coffee, and listened to the story of their downfall. No mention of karma. No acknowledgement of past choices. Just desperation from people who had never expected to need me. She sat in my conference room. The same woman who had cried about affording Tyler's tuition while dismissing mine. The irony filled the space between us like a living thing. Mom's hands shook as she explained their situation. Dad's pride kept him from calling personally. Tyler was going through a difficult time and couldn't help financially. The family that had functioned perfectly without me now needed the daughter they had forgotten. They needed the girl they had discarded to save them from the choices they had made. I listened without interrupting. Their crisis had brought them to my door, but it had also brought them to justice. I sat them down in my conference room the next day. Dad looked uncomfortable in his old suit. Mom kept glancing around at the expensive furniture. Tyler slouched in his chair like this was beneath him. What kind of help? I asked. Dad cleared his throat. We need jobs. Anything stable. Your brother too. Tyler added. You could pull some strings for us, right? Maybe talk to someone at one of those big companies you clean for. I hid my smile. They still thought I was just a bookkeeper for hire. Actually, I said softly, I might know someone who could help. They exchanged hopeful glances. Dad straightened his tie. Mom managed her first smile in weeks. Tyler finally looked interested instead of bored. They had no idea they were sitting in the conference room of one of the region's most successful consulting firms. The marble table, designer chairs, wall-mounted awards. They thought I was just an employee with connections. This company, you know, Dad asked carefully. Do they hire people our age? They hire based on merit, I replied. Experience, attitude, willingness to work. Tyler snorted. Sounds perfect for me. If only he knew what he was walking into. I arranged an interview for the following Monday, told them to dress professionally and arrive at the Cole Strategic Solutions building downtown. It's a really good company, I explained. Growing fast. The CEO is young but fair. My father straightened his tie. My mother looked hopeful for the first time in months. Tyler bragged about how quickly he'd charm whoever was in charge. They spent the weekend preparing, researching the company they thought they were interviewing with. They had no idea who they were about to meet. I watched them Google my company that weekend. Dad took notes about our client base. Mom practiced interview answers. Tyler updated his resume, embellishing his experience and downplaying his terminations. They called Sunday night to thank me for the opportunity. You've always been so helpful, Mom said. Even after everything, you're still looking out for family. The everything she referenced so casually was my destroyed college career. The sacrifice they had demanded and then forgotten. Monday morning, I dressed in my best power suit. I practiced my entrance, my tone, my expression. This moment had been 5 years in the making. They were about to meet the daughter they had underestimated. The woman they had created through their neglect. They arrived early, nervous but optimistic. My assistant led them into the main conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble table, the city skyline stretching beyond. They waited for the CEO, whispering among themselves about strategy and first impressions. When I walked in, wearing my best suit and carrying their files, their faces drained of color. Welcome to Cole Strategic Solutions, I said, calm as ever. I'm Rebecca Cole, founder and CEO. The silence that followed was worth every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment they had forgotten I existed. Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Dad gripped his armchair so hard his knuckles went white. Mom's purse slipped from her hands, hitting the marble floor with a soft thud. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but reality was sweeter than any fantasy. The look in their eyes, shock, recognition, disbelief, was everything I had worked toward. I believe you're here about employment opportunities, I continued, settling into my chair at the head of the table. Let's discuss what positions might be suitable. The power shift was complete. The girl they had dismissed now controlled their future. The daughter they had sacrificed was now their potential salvation. Justice had finally taken its seat at the head of the table. No one spoke for what felt like hours. Tyler's jaw worked like he was trying to form words. My father's face flushed red then pale. My mother's hands shook around her purse. Finally, Dad muttered, "You own this?" "I built this," I replied. "From nothing. From a one-room office above a laundromat. From the girl you thought would just land on her feet." I opened their files, real job applications I had prepared, real positions that needed filling. "Now," I said, "let's talk about those jobs you need." The applications were thorough. I had researched their skills, identified suitable positions, prepared fair compensation packages. Despite everything, I was offering them genuine opportunities. Dad stared at his file like it contained secrets to the universe. Mom wiped her eyes with tissues I had thoughtfully placed on the table. Tyler flipped through his application, reality slowly sinking in. "You've been planning this," Tyler said finally. "I've been building this," I corrected. "The planning started the night you graduated. The night Dad toasted my sacrifice like it was a victory." The weight of their choices filled the room. 5 years of consequences condensed into a single moment of reckoning. They were finally seeing the daughter they had overlooked. And she was magnificent. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply told them the truth. How every sleepless night, every rejection, every bill I had quietly paid for them over the years had built this company. How they had taught me that family sacrifices for success. "I just learned not to be the sacrifice," I said. Tyler stared at the table. Mom wiped her eyes. Dad looked like he was seeing me for the first time. "We had no idea," Mom whispered. "You never asked," I replied. The truth hung between us like a bridge none of us knew how to cross. They had dismissed my potential so completely that my success felt impossible. The math didn't add up in their minds. I pulled out a folder of newspaper clippings, magazine articles, business awards. 5 years of achievements they had missed because they weren't paying attention. "Young entrepreneur saves 50 local jobs," I read. Cole Strategic Solutions named Regional Business of the Year. Rebecca Cole, the consultant company's trust. Each headline was proof of the daughter they had overlooked. Evidence of the investment they had refused to make. "You were so busy celebrating Tyler's mediocrity that you missed my excellence entirely." Instead of throwing them out, I offered them something unexpected. Real positions. Entry level, but real. Administrative assistant for Mom in our HR department. Logistics coordinator for Tyler in operations. And for my father? A junior consultant position, reporting to the manager he would have once considered beneath him. "These are good jobs," I said. "Fair pay, benefits, room for growth. The same opportunity you never thought I deserved." Tyler's pride warred with his desperation. Dad studied the job descriptions like they were written in a foreign language. The positions were carefully chosen. Mom's organizational skills would serve HR well. Dad's manufacturing experience was valuable in consulting. Tyler's marketing background could be useful if he learned humility. "The salary ranges are in your packets," I continued. "Starting pay is competitive. Performance reviews every 6 months. Standard benefits package." I was offering them dignity along with employment. The chance to rebuild their lives under the umbrella of my success. "There's one condition," I added. "You start at the bottom. Like everyone else. Like I did." The girl they had forced to drop out was now their boss. The sacrifice they had demanded was now their salvation. The circle was finally complete. Tyler refused. "You're humiliating us," he shouted, standing so fast his chair rolled backward. "No," I said quietly. "I'm giving you what you gave me. A chance to start over." He stormed out, the conference room door slamming behind him. My parents sat in the aftermath of his tantrum, looking smaller than ever. "We'll take the positions," Dad said finally. Mom nodded, tears flowing freely now. It wasn't the reunion any of us had imagined, but it was the one we had earned. Tyler's reaction didn't surprise me. He had never learned to accept consequences, never understood that choices have prices. His entire life had been built on the assumption that things would work out, because they always had. But Mom and Dad were different. Humbler now. Beaten down by reality in ways that privilege had never prepared them for. "When do we start?" Mom asked quietly. "Monday," I replied. "Amy will show you around, explain our procedures." standard orientation process. They would learn my company from the ground up, understand the empire built on their discarded daughter's determination. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and absolutely inevitable. That night I walked past Murphy's Diner where it all began. The same booth where I used to dream and plan was visible through the window. I realized revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about becoming everything they said I couldn't be. They had tried to make me small, invisible, grateful for scraps. Instead, they had forged me into someone unstoppable. The scared girl who had left college was gone. In her place stood a woman who built companies and changed lives. Their rejection had been my salvation. Murphy himself waved from behind the counter. He remembered the quiet girl who studied business textbooks between orders. He had watched my transformation from desperate waitress to successful entrepreneur. "Heard your folks are working for you now," he said when I stopped in for coffee. "They're working for Cole Strategic Solutions," I corrected. "Just like anyone else." He smiled knowingly. Funny how things turn out. The booth where I had planned my comeback was now a shrine to perseverance. Every late night spent there had led to this moment. Every tear shed over cold coffee had watered the seeds of my success. The girl they had broken had rebuilt herself into something extraordinary. Tyler tried starting his own consulting business, using contacts he'd stolen from my company database. It failed within 3 months. Clients complained about his attitude, his lack of follow-through, his sense of entitlement. He called once asking for advice. I didn't answer. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Some people have to fail before they can change. I heard through industry contacts that he was working retail now, finally learning what honest work felt like. Maybe humility would teach him what privilege never could. His business cards had read Cole Consulting Solutions, close enough to mine to confuse potential clients. But proximity to my reputation couldn't mask his character flaws. Former clients called to warn me about his behavior. "Arrogant," they said. "Unprofessional. Nothing like you." Tyler had spent his whole life believing success was his birthright. Now he was learning that results required effort, respect had to be earned, and reputation took years to build but seconds to destroy. His retail job was at an electronics store in the mall. I drove by once and saw him through the window, explaining phone features to elderly customers. The golden boy was finally learning patience. Maybe his fall would become his foundation. Maybe hitting bottom would teach him to climb. One morning, I found a note on my desk. My father's careful handwriting on company letterhead. "You were right. You were always the one who would make this family proud. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." For the first time in years, I cried. Not from sadness or anger, but from something that felt like peace. The recognition I had craved for so long finally meant less than the strength I had found without it. I was proud of myself. That was enough. Dad had been working for me for 6 months. He started every morning at 7:30, stayed until his tasks were complete, never complained about assignments. The man who had once dismissed my dreams now implemented my strategies. His note was written on expensive company letterhead. The same letterhead that bore my name, my title, my vision. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, next to Tyler's graduation photo, next to the rejection letter from the college I never finished, next to the first dollar my company ever earned. Evidence of a journey that started with destruction and ended with redemption. The daughter they had overlooked had finally been seen, but she no longer needed their approval to know her worth. Their integration into my company wasn't dramatic, it was quietly transformative. They came to work every day, humble, respectful, learning that success required more than favoritism and wishful thinking. My mother excelled at organizing employee records. My father surprised everyone by genuinely caring about the clients he served. They no longer saw me as the dropout daughter. They saw me as the woman who had built something extraordinary from their discarded dreams. The family dynamic had finally balanced. Mom's first performance review was glowing. "Exceptional attention to detail," Amy wrote. "Goes above and beyond expectations." She had found purpose in helping other employees navigate benefits, resolve conflicts, plan career development. Dad's clients specifically requested him for follow-up consulting. His manufacturing experience, combined with humility, made him invaluable. He understood their struggles because he had lived them. Watching them succeed in my company was strange and satisfying. They were finally seeing business through my eyes, understanding the empire I had built while they weren't paying attention. "I never knew how hard you worked," Mom said one evening as we locked up together. "Now you do," I replied. Understanding had replaced assumption. Respect had replaced dismissal. The family was finally functional. Cole Strategic Solutions expanded into 5 states. I spoke at Harbor University's graduation, the same school I had never finished. When I walked onto that stage, 800 students cheered. The girl who had left in shame returned as a symbol of resilience. "Sometimes," I told them, "the path you're forced to take becomes the road to everything you were meant to be." I didn't need a degree anymore. I was living proof that determination could rebuild any broken dream. The university offered me an honorary doctorate. I declined politely. My education had come from Murphy's Diner, failed businesses, sleepless nights, and unwavering determination. Dr. Peterson was in the audience, now department chair. He approached me afterward, eyes bright with recognition and respect. "I always knew you were special," he said. "I just didn't know how special." My parents sat in the front row, tears streaming down their faces. This time, their pride was genuine and earned. They finally understood what they had almost destroyed. The girl who had been forced to leave was now teaching others to never give up. The dropout had become the inspiration. Sometimes the greatest education comes from surviving what seems impossible. As I stood on my office balcony overlooking the city, my parents' laughter from the break room echoed faintly below. This time it didn't sting. It sounded like healing. Tyler had finally swallowed his pride and asked for a job. I gave him one, entry-level like everyone else. This wasn't just revenge, I whispered to the wind. It was reinvention. I had become everything they said I couldn't be, built everything they said I wouldn't achieve. The girl they had sacrificed was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that the most powerful victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's becoming too successful for their rejection to matter. The Cole Strategic Solutions sign gleamed in the afternoon sun, and I smiled. Tyler's application sat on my desk, humble and honest for the first time in his life. "I want to learn," he had written. "I want to understand what you built. I want to earn my place." Maybe this was how healing really worked. Not through dramatic confrontations or grand gestures, but through quiet acknowledgement, honest work, and the slow rebuilding of trust. The family that had broken me had become the family I had remade. We were all different now, stronger, humbler, more honest about our flaws and our potential. I was finally home. Not because they had accepted me, but because I had accepted myself. The girl who had left college in shame had returned as a woman who built dreams instead of abandoning them. And that was enough.